Hey everyone, Mr. Wooten here once again. This is problem number 5 from the Unit 1 study guide dealing with equations and inequalities. And once again we have another problem where we are solving for a variable, again x in this case. And so if we look at this equation, we have 5 times the quantity 12x minus 2 in parentheses equals negative 3 times the quantity negative 7x plus 5 in parentheses. If I look inside my parentheses to try and see if there's anything I can simplify about this equation before I start, got 12x minus 2. This term has x's. This term does not. We cannot combine those quantities, so we have to leave those separate. Same thing over here. So there is nothing I can do in parentheses. There are no exponents. Is there any multiplying? Yes, there is. We have a 5 times this quantity. Excuse me. So that means I want to use the distributive property to multiply the 5 by the 12x and by the minus 2. And then over here, I want to multiply the negative 3 times the negative 7x and the negative 3 times the plus 5. Okay, so let's multiply this out. 5 times 12x, 5 times 12 gives me 60, so that becomes 60x. 5 times negative 2 gives me negative 10. Again, positive times a negative is a negative, so I just write it out like that. So that gives me 60x minus 10 on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I have negative 3 times negative 7x. So a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. And then 3 times 7 is 21, so we have 21x. Then negative 3 times plus 5, that's a negative times a positive. That's going to give me a negative. And 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, so that expression, or excuse me, the expression on the left simplifies to 60x minus 10. Expression on the right simplifies to 21x minus 15. So if you watch the video on number 4, or if you've already worked out problem number 4, you probably remember our goal in a problem like this where we have an equation with the same letter on both sides is to simply cancel out the letters on one side. Okay, reduce the amount of x's on either the right hand side or the left hand side so that you just have x on one side of the equation. It's going to make solving this much easier. So I personally like to get rid of the smaller value if I can. Well, first off, if there are any negatives, I like to cancel those out first. But if there aren't negatives, then I like to cancel out the smaller ones. If you subtract the smaller number of x's, you're going to end up with a positive number of x's on the opposite side. Okay, so I'll show you this right here. So since 21 is smaller than 60, if I take away 21x, those cancel. I'm left with negative 15 equals 60 minus 21. Okay, again, if you need to work that out, do so. So 0 minus 1, we're going to have to borrow 1 from our 6. That becomes a 5. So 10 minus 1 is 9. 5 minus 2 is 3. That gives us 39x. Okay? And then we have minus 10 still. So notice, since I took away the smaller number of x's, I had since I took away 21x, I ended up with a positive 39x. Had I subtracted 60x from both sides, that's not wrong. That's perfectly correct. The math works out completely. It is still your choice. You just would end up with a negative 39x. So just some people don't like to work with negative numbers as much as they like working with positive numbers. I'm one of those people. So I would simply always subtract the smaller number of x's just so I have positive values to work with. Okay, just a little tip. Again, but it is your choice. You do whatever you feel is most comfortable, and it is always an option when you're doing this type of problem. Okay, so 39x minus 10 equals negative 15. At this point, we need to continue working. I need to cancel out the minus 10 here on this left-hand side, and since I've got an equation now with x's on one side, I want to add 10 to both sides. That cancels out the minus 10. So I have 39x equals negative 15 plus 10. Okay. Again, think about where that's at. So if we were out on a number line, negative 15 way down here, then we turn around and add, we're working our way back up to 0. So how far have I really gone? If I've gone down 15 and now I turn around and add 10, I am now only negative 5 away from 0. Okay? So remember, you can think about it as almost like, since this is a bigger negative number, the bigger of the two numbers minus the smaller of the two numbers, and then keep the sign of the bigger number. So for instance, 15 is bigger than 10. So if I do 15 minus 10, since one is negative and one is positive, 15 minus 10 gives me 5. The bigger one is negative. That means the answer is going to be negative 5. Okay. So again, just another trick for adding numbers to negative values. So I get 39x equals negative 5. Then my last option is to divide by 39. to cancel out the multiplying x by 39, and I get x equals negative 5 divided by 39. I cannot divide those and get a whole number value, so I'm going to leave it in fraction form, and I also cannot reduce this. The only thing I can divide 5 by is 1 and 5, and so 39 can't be divided by 5. I'm going to have to leave that in fractional form as negative 5 over 39. Okay? So, the answer to that problem, negative 5/39. If you have any questions on this problem, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email, or you can just check with me in class about this. If you are good to go with this one, then go ahead and move on to question 6 or whichever other problem you have issues with next.